What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. We are back with the trade deadline edition of BuzzBeat. This is Richie, and there's a lot to talk about with Brandon Miller right now. He's showing out. He's having a good stretch of games, but I'm going to be joined by Brian and Spencer today as we discuss all the trade rumors, the trade chatter surrounding the Hornets as we head into Thursday's 3 p.m. deadline. As always, if you like what we do, please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to our episodes. Lastly, check out buzzbeat.substack.com for ad-free episodes, early access to episodes, and occasional written pieces. But yeah, that just takes all of 30 seconds to put your email into that database. Spencer, I know this has to be one of your favorite times of the year in the basketball calendar. How's it going?
Yeah, well, one of the most relevant times of the year for Charlotte Hornets fans and the franchise in general. But no, I do. I enjoy it. I am doing well for another time, BG, but Jordan Minor has given Virginia kind of a second life, maybe like a sixth life, really, on the season. So that's been fun to watch, and they seem very, very relevant, certainly in the ACC right now. But I am good. I am highly anticipating the Thursday deadline, and I told you, Richie, before we jumped on here, I think Charlotte could be maybe the belle of the ball, though, at least be in the final draw here.
Yeah, a lot of conversation surrounding Charlotte. Brian, if you had to rank the draft season, the free agent season, and the trade deadline season, where would you rank them?
I would go draft one for then like a pretty sizable gap. Then I would go to trade and then smaller gap to free agency. Charlotte's just like, I mean, for as far as what we do covering the Hornets, like free agency is just usually like not a huge thing to cover. And so looking at it through that lens, like I'm interested by all of it, obviously. But the draft far and away the thing I'm most intrigued by. And but yeah, this is shaping up for an interesting trade deadline. You know, the Hornets have already made one move, which everyone knows about with Rozier, and it feels like half the roster could be potentially, you know, we'll see. They may end up making 0 deals between now and Thursday, but feels like there's some other options on the table. And just should say for UVA, a couple of things. Reese Beekman's playing like almost ACC Player of the Year, like fringe, you know, conversation. Like no one's taken that from RJ Davis probably at this point. And even then, you've got Kyle Filipowski. There's a lot of other sort of like big names to throw in the mix, but Beekman is playing like a first-team All-ACC guard, in my opinion. Ryan Dunn may be like the National Defensive Player of the Year. He's that talented. And having he and Beekman on the same team is incredible. And yeah, Minor just doing like all the classical, like, you know, center things that Virginia needs. And having a guy that can screen, dive, and rebound on both sides of the court has given it just made it's everything else is able to fall into place. And they've got more lineup combinations. And it really helps when you've got guys like McNeely and Groves shooting the ball like that too. I mean, just changes everything for them.
So one really quick thing, Richie, and then we're going to talk about one.
You brought it up, Spencer.
I had this thought yesterday. I had to be on the road for a while, BG, and I thought they got the best backcourt defender maybe in the country, potentially the best wing defender in the country, certainly in the ACC, and now like just a good, solid college center. You know, he's good at a lot of things, not great at anything. Like they kind of match up against anybody.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. I mean, they're going to struggle offensively, but I'm like, it's crazy. 3 weeks ago, I thought this team was like dead to rights.
Their ability to like be able to like defend one-on-one in the post with Minor and now control the defensive glass is huge because that's where they were getting crushed earlier in the year. And it's changed everything there.
All right, so the UVA fans can tune out now. We're going to the Charlotte Hornet portion of our podcast, and we're going to lead off with the heaviest rumored name out there. And I don't know how legitimate these reports are with him to Phoenix, but let's talk about Miles Bridges. As everyone is aware, he's on a 1-year deal. He will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. And as we have noted on previous episodes and other platforms, he will have to consent to any trade that is lined up before it goes official. So that probably limits the pool in terms of the teams that could be considered. As far as the basketball player, he's got the talent as an on ball, like rim pressure guy. I know he's putting up the counting stats this season again after having a year off, but there are plenty of reasons to field offers or to try to get something out of him if you are maybe considering cutting ties with him this offseason. It's definitely a very complex situation. And I remember texting you guys over the weekend about, in reality, it's probably better to trade him after signing this new contract, like a sign and trade, or, further down the line, because there would be that long-term security. There would be more suitors for him. So approaching the Thursday deadline for Miles Bridges, I do think the pool is limited. And I even noted on the previous episode about the complications of trying to kind of sign Miles back on a team-friendly deal, because he actually has 5 years of experience instead of 6 years of experience because of that year off. So getting to that 7th year of experience is kind of like a milestone for some of these players. And maybe that doesn't matter to Charlotte, but I think if you want to trade him and you want to get something back, maybe you try to do it now versus failing to come to terms with him over the summer. I know they've got plenty of space, but if they're just not comfortable with making, a longer term deal, maybe you try to field offers. So it really all comes down to how comfortable they are in moving forward with him and what they would expect the market to be. But Spencer, just kind of give me your general thoughts about Miles Bridges being moved, and then potential thoughts about maybe to the Suns as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is as complicated of a trade deadline situation with the player as I can really ever remember, from multiple different angles. I mean, obviously the PR angle is where you start. And, I think trying to move him to a big market that's not LA, and specifically probably not the Lakers, becomes really messy. And then you move off that, and he's an expiring contract, on a $9 million qualifying offer deal. And Richie, as you mentioned, he's an expiring contract, and his bird rights do not travel with him. And along with all of that, he can nix any trade that he wants to because he loses his bird rights. So, you can talk me into 4 different scenarios that play out at the deadline or this offseason with Miles. I do get the sense that it's going to be hard to trade him at the deadline because I don't think Charlotte is that incentivized to rush unless they get a Godfather offer, which it's still possible because I think this is a very shallow market, so I wouldn't rule it out. But I do think that if a team, let's say like Utah, really thinks they can bring him in and they want him on a 4-year deal, or 4 or 5 year deal only that Charlotte can give him,
right,
with his bird rights, and then sign and trade him. Well, that's the whole reason Charlotte's not incentivized to do a deal now. So I hope they're doing their homework on who actually would prioritize him in the offseason. But, Phoenix, obviously, I think they could really use him. They're the one team that you can see him fitting into immediately that's also in like do or die mode. Like it's now or never. Like they're going for it. They should be operating as in they're going for it. Richie, I think you floated a trade. Was it earlier this week or late last week? The Watanabe, Nasir Little trade. I really think that, to me, that makes a lot of sense for Charlotte. Like aside from all the things we've talked about with Miles off the court that are obvious, I'm just kind of like, I know who this guy is as a player. I don't think he's a bad player. I don't think he's necessarily a losing player, but Charlotte does not need him anymore. They just don't. And that's more me talking about the on-court stuff than the off-court stuff. He scored 41 points last night, right? And I'm still like pretty firm in my belief that like this is not – they have to reset the culture, and this is not a guy you're going to reset your culture with. So I think the Phoenix deal is the most realistic. I think, Dallas has been mentioned. I wouldn't rule out a Lakers at the last second kind of trade. I really wouldn't. I mean, and Rich Paul he's going to find a way to control this process. I mean, on some level, we all know that. But at the end of the day, if I had to guess, I don't think that Charlotte's going to be able to trade him because I think they have enough leverage in the offseason to get more of a package back with him under contract for multiple years versus being an expiring contract where I just don't think it makes enough sense for them to pull the trigger.
Yeah, agreed. And to the Suns' perspective, they are the team that keeps popping up the most, but they have such little to offer. And the one that I did pose with Nasir Little and Watanabe and maybe like a second round pick or two, like that just seems so low. Like I think the Hornets would probably ask for a first round pick, but I'm not sure Phoenix is going to give that up for a rental player. I mean, I could be wrong.
There's been some reporting by Jake Fisher too within the last day about the Phoenix, Charlotte, Bridges hypotheticals. He mentioned a deal very similar to yours, Richie, which was like Nasir Little, a second round pick or two, and then Josh Okogie, as opposed to Watanabe. But it's the same, it's the same sort of deal. And I mean, the connections are like pretty obvious. I mean, Phoenix is a team that is incredibly desperate to win now, which really are the only sort of like types of teams that I think are like circling the wagons for Bridges at the moment. Like it's the Lakers or the Suns. It's the teams that have like, don't have a ton of like great salaries to move, especially Phoenix. Don't have a ton of like draft capital to move. I mean, the Suns, I don't even think can trade any first round picks. They've got some seconds they can flip. That's about it. I'll just say this, like, I know that those returns they seem low or whatever. I know this, and I'm selfish, or I suppose in this case, but like, this is one of those moments where I really don't care about like executive deal craft. I would just like him off the roster. Like I'm tired of watching Miles Bridges play for the Hornets. By the way, 0 rebounds while playing 40 minutes against the Lakers and scoring 41 points. I think when this guy was playing very well 2 seasons ago, he absolutely was a winning player. I'm not sure he's a winning player at the moment. The defense has been laughable. Like, I guess if you're checked out on this team, I kind of get it. But given that they're trying to like frame this as a second chance for Miles, which has always like made me pretty queasy, you would think a guy like that might care about the details a little bit more. So I'm just ready for it to be over with. If he's not moved at the deadline this year, which I have my fingers crossed that he will be, perhaps it's a sign and trade this summer. Just I'd like, as they're going to start to rebuild this around Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, I would prefer for Miles Bridges to be somewhere else and not an employee of the Charlotte Hornets anymore. So we'll see. Like I could see a team, and I mean, like Spencer brought it up too, but like the fact that like Rich Paul and Clutch have a ton of leverage in the situation right now, and just given how narrow the market probably is for Bridges, it makes me feel like something won't get done. But I absolutely could see if they decide in the next 2 days that they want Miles in Phoenix, then I suppose it's something that could happen. But it feels like a tough needle to thread at the moment.
Yeah, and I would say too, like I do think that the Lakers have the kind of salaries where there are a lot of different like machinations of a deal. Like, Hachimura, he's played more recently, but hasn't played as much this season as I think a lot of people thought he would. Like, his number's not huge. It's 17 million next year. It's 15.7 this year. Like, that's Miles Bridges, Cody Martin. If that were to interest you, works pretty quickly. I would be trying to move off both those guys. Like, I tweeted this the other day. Like, I would try to be packaging a few of these players that the Hornets have that probably aren't a serious piece of the future. Mm-hmm. If it's Miles Bridges and Cody Martin for Hachimura and 2 second-round picks, or a well-protected late, like I would do that kind of thing. You have Gabe Vincent, who hadn't played all year. He's on like $11 million this year. Like, the math really works for the Lakers and Charlotte to do a trade. Mm-hmm. Does it make enough sense on the court? Like, if I were Charlotte, I'd be operating from a stance of, I'm not really trying to get a player back. Like, yes, I'll take a player that like can play 15 minutes a game for me next year. Like, yes, I need bodies and I got to meet the salary floor before next season. So I need contracts. But like, ultimately, like, I'm just trying to extract assets, and it's really hard for me to believe that they're going to bring him back to play for the Hornets next year. If they're very confident that a sign and trade is doable in the offseason and they actually think they're going to have more suitors, which I get, that's very arguable, I would do it. But once you don't trade him at the trade deadline, like, that's your only option. That's it. And you're facing another situation, as this franchise has been in a lot, of losing a guy for nothing against Clutch Sports and Rich Paul. And that doesn't make me real confident. So I would be trying to move him now probably, but it's going to be hard.
Even if it meant like sacrificing the value of him, because I've had a lot of people mentioning to me today, like, you know, if you're going to trade him, do the sign and trade. But so you would be okay with like sacrificing value right now, Spencer, just to see, okay, there's an unknown in the summer.
I think so. I think I would. I think, and look, like, you did Miles, like, you didn't have to bring him back, right? So if you really turn the clocks back, are you sacrificing value? If you're still getting something for him in the end, you didn't have to bring him back at all, right? So, like, we look at value in like this moment in time, but Charlotte didn't have to offer him a qualifying offer, right? But they did. So it's, you know, it's playing that mental game. I would try to get off of him at all cost, you know, not for free, obviously, but yeah, I would.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like I said, I care less about sort of like maximizing, and would just feel better about getting him out of here. And if you pick up something in the process of doing that, then fine. Like, end of business with this person. And it has been amazing to see, and I get it. I've felt the same way, but to see like Suns fans and Suns media people like recoiling at the possibility of bringing him in, like, you know, I get it. I totally get it. I wouldn't want the team I'm covering or rooting for to add this guy to the mix. But we've talked about Bridges plenty on this pod, and yeah, you'd also have to remember too, like, there's a good chance that it's probably a new GM that's coming in, or a new president of basketball ops that would be coming in to have to handle that in the summer, most likely. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Mitch Kupchak and the current regime, but it does feel like that's something to keep an eye on. I do wonder, like, this is, since we're just talking like I guess the Lakers a little bit here, like, I suppose DeJounte Murray is still still available, although maybe Atlanta is going to hold on to him and try to make some noise in the play-in tournament. Which, I mean, that's fine, I guess. I guess they could try to trade him, you know, like down the line too, or whatever. Like,
you mean make some noise in the barbecue series, right?
Yeah, exactly. But like, my thing I was asking y'all, do you think, like, seeing how there's just like looking at the trade market now, seeing what the landscape looks like, do you think the Lakers could have any sort of like regret from not going after, like, pursuing Rozier? I don't think it's not like I think they could have put together like an offer. I think it would have been like identical to, or very similar to what Miami came through with. And I suppose, you know, D'Angelo Russell's played well recently. If you get him back, Reeves in a better role, like, maybe it's like not such a big deal to add someone else or whatever. But I was kind of wondering the other night, like, if Murray isn't moved, while this, you know, that's happening as LeBron is like putting his thumb down on the scale, trying to get a transaction done between now and Thursday, like, if there was just any sort of like, you know, cognitive dissonance from you know, not, you know, landing a player like Rozier.
Well, I think it's clear that the Lakers tried to shove the Murray trade down everyone's throats, right? Because it was like a week ago, this seemed like it was a done deal. It was a matter of time. They were just kind of negotiating through. But we all know how that makes it through to the Twitterverse and all the headlines. That's Clutch Sports, right? There's just them flexing. Yeah, I think maybe. I think you're probably onto something there, BG. I still think it's these mid-tier contracts they have. Like, the Lakers are actually in better position than like most. I'm contenders in air quotes here with the Lakers, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like, they actually have contracts to move and get a role player back. They're going to have to part with a future asset that they're going to have to bite hard. I think.
Yeah. Agreed.
But I think I think you're onto something. Like I think they'd love to have Rozier right now for that price, for that price.
Right. And like, Levine's off the table now because of the injury too. Just like all of a sudden the like shooting guard market seems to have like dried up as far as like name, 20 point per game type scores go.
Right.
Again, that sort of depends on what the availability of Murray is, I suppose, the next 2 days.
Yeah, to your point, Brian, I do think that the offer that Miami had probably was going to be the better one, because if you include Russell's got that player option next year, which is probably not as attractive to the expiring that they got from Lowry. So we will shift over to PJ Washington. I don't think the Hornets are going to trade both Miles and PJ, but it could be in consideration to trade one of the two. And Washington, at least at this moment, would probably have a better return than Bridges. He's got 2 more seasons after this one, so you get more team control with him. If you are a team that is acquiring him, I've heard Orlando as a rumored destination for PJ. I've heard the Knicks with Randall out indefinitely, and that could be a spot for him to land. But the team that keeps popping up with PJ, even this past offseason, was Dallas. So I know there was a report out there, I believe it was from Mark Stein, where the Hornets, if they were to kind of engage in a trade with PJ to Dallas, Josh Green is that guy that the Hornets would really push hard to be included. And you would get, a really good young player in Josh Green. He's been playing very well as of late. You get some point of attack defense. You get a little bit of playmaking. You get the 3-point shot with him. And this hypothetical deal for Charlotte would be centered around him. Like he would be like the quote unquote prize that the Hornets would be receiving from Dallas. What's interesting about Josh Green is that he is still on his rookie contract of the $4.7 million that he signed, but he did have an extension that will kick in this offseason. So that poison pill provision that people talk about sometimes, where the outgoing salary for Dallas will still be at that $4.7 million, but the incoming salary for Charlotte will be that 4.7 average with his yearly extension. So I think that comes out to like 11 million. So it's not like it's insurmountable by any means, but it does kind of complicate things when you include Josh Green within a deal with Dallas. So the most simplistic deal that I came up with was Richaun Holmes and Josh Green for PJ. And that works. And it's kind of crazy to see how the Hornets fans and the Hornets community were trying to sign Richaun Holmes, and how he's kind of fallen off since his days in Sacramento, with his role being diminished behind Derek Lively. So maybe his push shots just aren't working in Dallas. So, Brian, how do you feel about the Dallas trade that I just presented, and or really just kind of fielding offers for PJ in general?
Yeah, I mean, they should be fielding offers for PJ now. I think it's sort of doing your due diligence. I still think probably, if you're going to trade PJ, I think it probably still makes most sense to do it this summer, when teams will have more stuff to offer in terms of draft picks available. So there's that. And, as you sort of laid out, there's 2 years left on the contract. It's a very like tradable number. It's a very team friendly, movable number. So there's no like urgency. It's just sort of like, when do you think you can get the best offer for PJ? I don't mind this one from Dallas. Like, I will say, like, Josh Green he is a player type that I'm very interested in the Hornets sort of pursuing, like, with their cap space going forward, like, both in terms of like, one, I would like to see them rent that out to take on bad salary so they can, add draft picks, like that type of stuff. That's something I'm interested in. But I'm also intrigued by Charlotte finding ways to bring wings in that you can fit next to Miller, you can fit next to LaMelo. They can play with those guys. If they're good, you can keep them, try to have them be a part of the picture moving forward. If not, maybe you can look to move them and get something for them down the line. In Green sort of strikes me as this would be sort of like an opportunistic way to add one of those player types. But I kind of like it as a possibility. PJ would be really good for a Dallas team that could, I think, use like another shooter in the front court room. They've really been hit hard by injuries recently. And, Luka's being asked to carry a pretty tremendous offensive load for them at the moment. So, I'm not like, obviously I don't think that's like some amazing return, but I think it's like fair-ish, and maybe you have something with Green. I'm not totally sure how you guys feel about his defense. I think he's like very good at doing some things defensively. I don't think he's this like amazing shutdown screen navigator type guy at the point of attack, but still solid on that end and with some upside. So, um, yeah, I think he'd be a nice player to add to the fold. But I would really be most interested in like finding ways to turn PJ into draft picks, and I think your odds of doing that are better this summer. And like, I'm also fine if they just decide they want to keep him around. Like, I'm not like opposed to there. Again, there should be no pressure to move this guy. We could be having this conversation at the deadline next year with him. But he's young. He's a good player. And he can like fit within like the reset timeline, I think too. So I'm fine with them holding on to PJ, at least kicking the can down the road to the summer or maybe into next season.
Yeah, Dallas is an interesting suitor for PJ. The poison pill definitely complicates things, as you laid out, Richie. But you can still work something, around Josh Green and Grant Williams, who's a distressed asset, I would say, right now. And I would be sniffing around because he could be a rotation player in Charlotte quickly. In fact, I think the Hornets almost walked away from PJ Washington last summer so they could maybe give an offer sheet to Grant Williams. So it'd be a very interesting, look back in time, like time machine challenge trade. But yeah, I think it's gonna be hard to get future draft assets from Dallas. Just in the situation.
They don't have a lot.
What's that?
They don't have a lot to begin with.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't really have much to trade you, but I do think something built around it. It might take another player. I haven't put this one through the trade machine from Charlotte's standpoint to make the money work. But a Grant Williams, Josh Green package based around PJ, I'm definitely listening. But, to Brian's point too, Charlotte's not in a rush to trade him. He's under contract through the 26 into the 26 season at a very, very fair deal. I just, and again, going back to kind of my thought process from the weekend when I tweeted this, like I would be trying to trade all of Cody Martin, Miles Bridges, PJ Washington, who are your three guys right now who have value, number one, and number two, I think are very, very tradable for obvious reasons that we've already touched on. And it's not because I don't think these guys can not be good NBA players or make an impact somewhere else. It's just, it's rotten in Charlotte right now, and they have something to do with that. And if it's time to tear it down, and I'd be surprised if all of us don't agree that it's time to tear it down, like those are the three that it kind of has to start with, right? So it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, Richie, when you were like, so you would take less value for Miles. Like, yeah, this is a garage sale right now. Like, really, I mean, like when you really boil it down to its pure components, this is kind of a garage sale. And if we can sneak out value here or there, that's great. But like, we're going to have a new coach. We're going to have a new GM. We're going to have another probably top four. I mean, certainly a top four pick, you would think. Like, and you got LaMelo under contract for lots more years and Brandon Miller under contract for lots more years. Like, if you don't do it now, like we're going to be having the same exact conversation next year. I'd be trying to get all these guys out of the building, not because they're bad guys or not because they're bad players, but it's rotten. And when it's time to press reset, press freaking reset. Don't press half reset. This franchise is in a place to press full reset right now.
Yeah, I can't wait for Richie to clip that line that Spencer just said for the promo this episode on Twitter and stuff. Worth mentioning too. I mean, a few other teams have popped up as like potential suitors for Washington. Jake Fisher again from Yahoo reported, I think earlier this week or maybe late last week, that New York, the Knicks were a team that was interested in PJ. So, I don't know, maybe something around, Evan Fournier's contract and some, obviously the Knicks have a lot of picks. I don't know if they'd be willing to part with a one unless it was pretty heavily protected, but just another team that could at least like throw its hat in the race for PJ and maybe has some stuff to offer too. So again, I can see why a lot of teams should be interested in him. I think a team like Oklahoma City should be interested in him. He can play several positions. He can shoot. He moves the ball, maintains advantages. Like teams should be considering him a guy that can help them and be in a playoff rotation. My opinion, like we won't know for sure about PJ until we see it. But I've been on record for a while now saying I think this guy is a guy that can be on the floor in a postseason game. I think he needs to kind of get mentally ready for that because he's just been sort of stuck in this terrible culture that Spencer was referring to. It's worth mentioning like the comments Terry Rozier had the other week, right? Talking about just sort of like the loser mentality around the franchise. And yeah, I will say, like you mentioned his name too. Cody Martin does strike me as a guy that if he were healthy, Charlotte would be, he's a wing. The shot's been up and down, but he's a wing. He can defend a little bit. He can at least handle the ball some offensively. He's shown capability to shoot at times, probably not like a lock to be in a postseason rotation, but could potentially be depending on matchups and stuff like that. So, but he's played 25 games the last 2 seasons, and he hasn't really been like an effective player in a long time. So he feels like a little uneasy to move at the moment.
When you said he played 25 games the last 2 seasons, you could be talking about a handful of guys on the Hornets. So
yeah, that's true.
No, but I'm with Spencer in terms of just kind of like reshaping, rebuilding, whatever word you want to use with this roster. And, I get it. Yeah, you might have to give up some value. You might have to concede a couple things. And I would not trade both Miles and PJ, but definitely field these offers for these guys and see what you can get back. And it's funny because like they made this trade with Terry Rozier. That to me signals that they're trying to rebuild. That to me signals that
no question.
Things up.
Yeah.
So like they got to fully commit to this, like Spencer was saying. They can't have to do this.
We talked about it, but it's the first time they've made one of those types of transactions, and I don't know the last time they made one like that, where it was straight up just like moving off of a veteran to pick up a draft pick.
Which I know we need to keep moving. Regulator, one of our live listeners tonight, mentioned this Hollinger rumor, and I haven't seen this. So, yeah, Richie just pulled it up here. So the hot rumor in the league circles is that the Hornets' new ownership will make a change in the front office after the trade deadline. So that's worth
that's weird.
That's very weird.
Yeah.
And that's a weird piece of information to come out. Certainly is not coming out from the Hornets ownership. It's a brand new group. They're trying to keep things clean right now, which is the reason they haven't already fired Mitch. I would be doing I don't want to say I would be doing or that you should do things the opposite way, but I actually thought there was a really good argument to be made that this should work exactly the opposite. Don't let Mitch handle this trade deadline. Get ahead of this. But I also understand the pushback against that because I floated that out to a few folks, and they did tell me but you really, really shrink your candidate pool, right?
Yeah.
For who that person would be, or you're going to keep it in house. So I totally get it, but that's a very weird piece of information to come out, I think, from Hollinger. That's very weird to me. Just wanted to point that out.
Agreed. It's too late to do anything now with Mitch and as we approach this Thursday deadline, but I don't know why they'd make a change afterwards or at least immediately afterwards. Obviously, we just kind of wait to the summer at that point.
Yeah.
I did see Mitch was at the Duke UNC game last weekend with his it's the first time I've ever since he got to Charlotte. I think it's the first time I've ever seen him not in a Hornets fleece or Q-zip, quarter zip or whatever. So it was odd to see initially, but I was imagining just knowing the cell service inside of the Dean Dome. I was trying to imagine Dennis Lindsay from the Jazz is trying to get a hold of him, but just the texts aren't going through, the calls are dropping.
Sounds like a Curb episode. He goes up and he's in the rafters. He's trying to get cell service. Nobody pick up the phone.
The Jazz are calling with a Godfather offer, but yeah, UNC's in the middle of a 7-0 run. The Dean Dome's rocking, and that phone's just going unanswered.
All right, the next two players I think we need to mention are kind of in the same category: Kyle Lowry, Gordon Hayward. both veterans on large expiring contracts, both guys that could potentially like be on a playoff roster and, be competitive and compete for that team. And obviously if Hayward's healthy, I think that would be a big pickup for any team that could potentially acquire him. Now, there are restrictions on these two when it comes to the buyout market because of their salaries being above that 12.5 million standard mid-level exception. So teams that are above that tax apron of that $172 million will not be able to sign them on that buyout market. So Clippers, Suns, Celtics, Bucks, those are just some of the teams that are out there. So if they want to get their hands on Kyle Lowry or Gordon Hayward, those teams specifically will have to trade for them. Now, Lowry has been linked to the 76ers. That seems like an obvious connection with like the Pennsylvania, Villanova. That feels right. The Lakers, the Magic. So those are the teams as of now, and they don't have to worry about the rule that they can go ahead and sign them because they're not over the tax apron unless they make a trade before then. So I don't really have like strong feelings on these two. I just keep forgetting that Kyle Lowry is technically on the roster. It just slips my mind because of that trade and just not seeing him in a uniform. But I think the most likely path is for Lowry to be bought out. And I actually think nothing happens in regards to Hayward. If you can trade Lowry, like I guess go for it. Try to get back maybe a pick. I think you'll probably have to take on extended salary in this situation and take on a bad contract. And then Hayward, on the other hand, as Mark Stein has reported, is very unlikely to seek a buyout if he is not traded. So I think he'll probably just see what the future holds for him in the offseason. And I've mentioned this several times, but depending on the contract, there's certainly a reason to at least consider. I mean, I don't think I would do it, but just consider bringing him back as a veteran off the bench where the expectations would be lower and he wouldn't be like in charge to produce as a starter. So I really haven't looked at that number yet. I don't know, 9 million, something like that. I mean, it has to be a consideration, something like that. So Spencer, do you think either of these two get dealt, and how's that going to go down, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way it really goes down is giving massive salary relief to one of these teams over the tax. So, you mentioned the teams that are at the second apron, but you got, I'm looking at it here now, you got 9 teams that are owe luxury tax, starting with the Lakers, Sixers, Heat, Nuggets, Celtics, Bucks, Suns, Clippers, Warriors. So I think that's really like the only way that one of these guys gets dealt is that you're giving, I mean, it's a big number, but they're both expiring contracts and you're taking on, multiple years of dead money. I've gone through, a few of them. Like, let me pull up. Oh, I had Golden State's. I thought Golden State, maybe. Like, I was thinking about Andrew and how he might fit coming back to Charlotte in some kind of Gordon Hayward-esque deal. I mean, Charlotte would be saving Golden State like just this year. And Golden State would have to send something back to save a little bit, something else back on top of Wiggins to save some money this year. But then he's under contract for 3 more years, and every single one of those years is $25 million plus. So, like, the amount of money in tax dollars that Golden State would save with an aging Clay, with an aging Draymond, with an aging Steph Curry, like, you got to at least like meet about that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the one that really, but at the same time, I don't. Yeah, and regular saying Wiggins and Moses would do it. I just don't see Golden State doing that. I think that Golden State would ask for a future asset from Charlotte, even a very, very light one, to do that deal because of Wiggins' age. But boy, you got to meet about that.
Then click. Like that's like
a then fine.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, like a healthy Hayward would like honestly help them too. Like, I mean, if it's possible that he's gonna, he actually like would be a good system fit there offensively. I think he like again, healthy version of him would be very good for Steph and would sort of fit into their motion scheme. It's just a bummer he got hurt. Like he was, I mean, this happens every year now, but he was playing so well to start the season. He looked like a potentially interesting trade option. Probably 15, 20 games into the year. And then, the inevitable injury happened. And I don't know when he's going to come back, if he'll come back this season. And certainly like if there was going to be the ability to trade him, it just sort of got like washed away because he's not actively playing at the moment. And yeah, like I just don't. It's hard to see as far as like Lowry goes. It is funny to see him like on the Hornets basketball reference page. I saw that earlier today. It made me do like a double take. I think he just sort of looms as like an obvious buyout candidate. And a guy that like, yeah, I think all roads lead to Philly. Like it makes sense. They're one of, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on Embiid, his health, which is a big question mark at the moment. But like they're one, like so many of the teams that are at that, second apron threshold, like that can't add him because his salary is well above the mid-level. Like Philly is one of the teams that's like in that like, quasi contender or, legit contender status that financially could, bring in a guy like that. So that one does seem to make quite a bit of sense. But
the other thought here is can Charlotte help one of these teams? Boy, it's tough though.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it. This thought just came to mind. Can they help one of these teams get below that second apron so they can go approach one of these buyout guys? So it's almost like you're making a trade, help them out so they can go bid later. But it's I think the math is still, without trying to make this really boring, it's still just it's hard. It's hard. So with a few of these teams, like Philly's one of those teams. Yeah.
And like we've discussed the possibility of bringing Hayward back this offseason. Like I'm certainly not opposed to it. I think there are probably like more creative ways to go forward with your cap space and your roster spots. But like, I mean, to bring up the same old phrase again, like when healthy, he's good. Maybe he still, you can still flip him for something eventually. And ultimately, like that wouldn't be a bad player to have. He's not going to take anything away from, Miller or LaMelo. Like if anything, he just sort of amplifies things. I just get the feeling he would want to go play for a team that has more stakes. Like he's just been kind of stuck here for a while now. So I don't know how much it feels like to keep him in Charlotte, they'd have to, I don't know, pay a premium necessarily or whatever, but like they'd have to give him like, I think probably what, 15, 18, 20 million a year,
Makes sense.
So I just, I could be wrong. Maybe he's willing to play for way less. That seems unlikely because he's still good. So anyways, that's sort of like my thoughts on Hayward going forward. I just wish he was healthy. It would make him even with that salary, which is tough to move, that's a barrier to entry with any sort of like Hayward hypothetical deal, but it just feels like it's wiped away that possibility that 6 weeks ago certainly seemed like a strong card for the Hornets to play.
Yeah, just to kind of between these two, I would just say like not stating I am stating the obvious here. Hayward's much more likely to like some kind of buzzer deal, just because he's got so much more value from an on-court perspective. Obviously, his salary's less, not a lot less, but it's less. And like, yes, if he were healthy, he could help a contender. He could help a playoff team. So I think that him being moved is extremely more likely than Lowry. I just don't see it for Lowry.
Yeah, I think Hayward's probably more likely to be moved in a trade. I think Lowry is just more likely to be off this team, going to be bought out regardless. So that's kind of how I view it. So, but to Regulator's point, I do think Brian, like he says, he's become more domesticated since moving to Charlotte. I do think that like his family has just settled down here, and you almost wonder, just being on the Hornets, like has he become numb to losing? And he's just, okay, I'll just get my money right on sunset, get my $9 million and just sit at the end of the bench and be a veteran on this team and kind of see where it goes from there. But who knows how his future
and look, all parties got to play, right? Like all parties got to play. And even if you have a no trade clause, like the Hornets can still do what they're going to do, but that's a dangerous game as a small market team with very little credibility across the league. So, I think Hayward's got multiple kids, lots of young family. Like, yeah, you don't again, as a small market like Charlotte with very little credibility, you just don't piss off veterans like that and send them just wherever without their consent. I mean, it's kind of good faith kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's a good point.
Yeah. All right. I just want to get like 2 rapid fire questions here before we wrap up this episode. And we really didn't talk about Nick Richards that much, but I feel like his name has been floating around there as well. But if you were to make a prediction, guys, of these 4 players, Richards, Washington, Hayward, and Bridges, how many of those guys get moved via trade before Thursday?
I'm going to go real. My optimistic mindset is 2. My realistic mindset says 1.
Yeah.
I think that Washington is, to me, the most likely to get moved, just because there's so many things lining up. Good value contract, under contract for multiple more seasons, young player. Like, Hornets have got to be fielding a good amount of calls on that kind of player, right? We've talked about Bridges. There's a lot of complications there. Richards is interesting, but $5 million, it's just it's hard to, it's like and like 2 expiring minimum deals and a second-round pick. Like, do I just want to get rid of that guy for that? Like,
that's why the Richards deals like never made. Like, I get it. I get that there are teams looking for backup center, and there are other guys available. You've got Andre Drummond, Kelly Olynyk. Like, there are other like backup centers that could be moved. Seems like Olynyk's going to be moved. Richards obviously a different player than Olynyk, but he's I think in the midst of his second season being like a rotation player, he does a lot of like conventional center things pretty well. Screen, roll, dive, drop coverage, hit the offensive glass. So I do. He's limited obviously, but that discrete set of skills he has is still has value. But like, it just never really made that much sense to me because it's such a small salary that if it's just like, if that's the only outgoing salary and it's not like attached to anything else, then what are you really getting in return? Like, it would just be filler. I don't think you're going to get like another like young player of note that's on like a rookie contract back for him. And I can't imagine like the draft capital that he would return outside of like a so-so second round pick. Like, it just doesn't. And so just, if that's the case, why would the Hornets be in a rush to move him when he has 2 more years left on his deal beyond this one? Like, he's obviously not untradeable. And I get that there's a market for backup for size and for center depth, but those moves just always sort of struck me as like, I suppose there were some like legitimate reports, but it sort of struck me more as like people in like NBA, sort of like Twitter cap space areas, sort of like looking at which teams are obvious seller. The Hornets are one of them. And then, backup center market is, it exists. And then Richards is a salary that's like easy to plug into the trade machine. You know what I mean? Just like it struck me as more like that than something that the Hornets would be like actually pursuing. But I wouldn't be surprised if they've gotten calls on him. I just can't imagine they'd get an offer that would make them want to move him now. And like, if they were to trade Richards, they would like absolutely like have to get a center back in return because like they have no centers, right? Like, they've got, it's just, and like, he's played okay. Like, he's played all right this year. I actually think he's had some nice moments. But like right now the center rotation is like PJ, who might get traded, and Richards. So like, that's it. And not to go off on a tangent, but like, can we get a Mark Williams update sometime soon? I mean, I'd love to know. I mean, I know he hurt his back, and that's pretty scary. Those injuries are like nothing to take lightly, but like, man, I'd love some information on the big fella, because
hopefully they're just being careful with him. But I think you made the key point on Richards, BG, when it comes to the trade deadline. Like, I do think that he's got to be attached to a larger deal, like him and Hayward going to Golden State. And somehow Looney being involved with Wiggins, like that. Now you're starting to talk about something, but he's got to be attached to something. Yeah. He's not going out by himself. The math's not going to work.
Yeah. I actually put out a trade today that expanded the PJ Washington trade, where it was Richards and PJ going to Dallas, the Hornets would be getting Rashawn Holmes if you consider him,
Yeah.
backup
Yeah.
center material. But then you get Jaden Hardy and Josh Green in addition, and that works. So I don't know if Dallas would do that with those young guys coming our way, but they definitely need front court help.
Yeah, that wouldn't be. I mean, Richards could be a decent backup to Lively. Like Duke runs pick and roll Luca. Like it's not that trade like makes some sense if you're like running out the ground ball on it for something that's probably not going to happen. But like
Dallas is
conceptually.
I like that's the exact kind of trade Charlotte should be looking at when it comes to like trying. If it's not going to be draft picks, like can we get some young players in the system? But I just can't imagine that Dallas would ever part ways with Hardy and with Green. Josh Green might be on the best contract in the NBA right now. So I just seriously, I just wouldn't be in like a real rush to move off of him. But I mean, exactly the machination Charlotte should be looking at.
And look, Dallas. I mean, they usually do. It's not like they have a track record of like misvaluing or like not properly valuing young guards on the roster.
Quite possibly one of the worst misevaluations in the NBA in the history of the league.
Whoops, our bad, you guys.
No shit.
Sorry. Like I know, like I get on the Hornets for letting Malik Monk walk out the door and be like a fringe 6th man of the year, but they left like the guy who should be starting at the East starting in the All-Star game this year. Walk out the door for zilch.
Should he be second team All NBA this year?
It's unbelievable. Meanwhile, like Luka's like playing on a bad leg with like a 40% usage rate, and it's like somehow this is. I don't know if this is working actually.
Oh, Brian, to that question, how many of those guys get traded? Do you think? Prediction?
Oh yeah, sorry. I would say 1. I would not be surprised by 0. If you set the over/under at 1.5, I would take the under.
Okay.
How about you, Richie?
No, that's where I was going to set the over/under, and I would go under as well. So
yeah.
All right. Last quick question: of those 4, just take those 4 out. What is a guy on the Hornets that you feel like might get moved by Thursday that's not been talked about a lot? You keep mentioning Cody.
That Martin was would have been my answer to this question, but just like given the health concerns with him too, it just seems unlikely as well. So,
do you think there's any chance they might throw in like Book Night as a filler?
Yeah, that was going to be my next one. I think Book Night just as like a here. Like take this and put him in your here. Like I mean, but not in like obviously a deal on his own, like going with somebody else. But there's nothing else on the roster. That's it. That's it.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right, guys. Thanks again for joining for another episode. And for those that joined us late live here on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch, I doubt anyone's watching on Twitch, or anywhere you're watching us live, this will be out as an episode version soon. If you like it ad-free, be sure to check out buzzbeat.substack.com. The trade rumors are going to start to pick up. The trades are probably going to go down closer to Thursday's 3 p.m. deadline for Spencer.